There are two poles in life anytime we are having either religious or philosophical discussion. There are two poles. One pole is the pole of truth. That is my reflection and what I'm saying. And another pole is lies. The other pole, the first one is lies. The first one is truth. The second one is lies. But in between these poles, there is another element, which is very, very serious, and it should guide believers as far as our decisions or discussions are concerned. Truth is obvious. It is something you can see when it is approaching. It is very clear. It is easy to detect. Lie is also very easy to detect. It is also obvious. So usually, it becomes very easier if you are working with truth or if somebody is telling you the truth. But when it comes to deception, deception is an amalgamation or a chameleon caricature, which want to sometimes present itself as truth or as a lie. So usually in scriptures, we are being admonished. Jesus himself used the word, do not be deceived, do not be deceived several times. And as a matter of fact, that is not a suggestion to Christians. It is a command. And as a command, we should pay every price there is to avoid or to prevent ourselves being deceived. That is why I am always and constantly expecting people to help me so that one, I will not be deceived, neither will I become an instrument in the hands of the deceiver to deceive others. With this at the background and with this in our mind, we should also come to a point that we will be humble enough to accept all challenges, criticisms at all times. So I'm also subjecting myself for proper scrutiny. Now, for the past 2-3 days, I've been seeing some videos and some comments on Facebook about Apostle Dr. Abel Damina. So I decided as an apologist, this is the approach I adopt in everything I do. I came to the limelight 2017 on social media after my entanglement with Abraham Ben Moshe. Before I came publicly to comment about him, I have to do whatever it takes to be under him, either covertly, let me use the word covertly, to study under him continuously for close to 6 months, just to understand him, know where he's coming from, so that I can better respond to him. Because I've been saying that a good apologist is someone who is able to accurately represent his opponent and point the loopholes in his or her thinking. The first Muslim I debated in public, I was in his group for close to 1 year. The day I came up publicly to challenge him for public debate, he thought I was something he could easily sweep under his carpet. But after the debate, the chairman of the occasion, who was a Muslim, said, "You have come here to shake the foundation of our faith. We are going to do our research and we will come back to you." Unquote, July 9, 2016. They took the video got missing. Up to today, we've not seen the video. I'm waiting for their comeback for the topic. I'm saying this to help you to know that before you comment on a man of God or a teacher, try to listen to him and see if you can understand where he is coming from. Because some public comments we make can be slip of tongue, it can be overgeneralization, it can also be made based on some assumptions. Some public statements we make can be slip of tongue, or it could be overgeneralization. Overgeneralization simply means that there are some statements they make just like that in the name of under inspiration. Or we make some comment under some assumptions. The assumptions are that, you remember those of you who sat here for close to 3 weeks to 2 months, we went through the book of Genesis systematically, particularly Genesis chapter 5, we spent close to 30 minutes on it. But within this short time, look at how I have summarized it. Even though I have done that with the assumption that everybody here was there when I was discussing it. So these are some of the things that could influence our public utterances. So when you are measuring us, you need to take time, investigate the issue, understand us first before you make a public comment about us. Now, when I started investigation, even though I've been listening to some of his messages for quite some time, but this particular issue, I went to his Facebook page, and the title of that particular event, thankfully, I watched the video, which is 1 hour 41 minutes or so. Secondly, and graciously, there was a transcript of that event there. And so the title of the program is Happy Hour Loop, Bush House, Nigeria, XLFM. XLFM, he did that on the same program, he did that at a radio station, 106.9. Studio guest, Dr. Abel Damina. Team, 30 Days of Glory. Those of you who have been following him, he started a program which is a 30 days program. And so as part of the program, initial days, he did this studio interaction, responded to these questions just to whet the appetite for people to patronize the program. Interestingly, he laid a strong foundation before he reached where he reached. But for time's sake, we might not be able to go through the foundation. But there were 10, 12 questions that were asked him. The fourth or the fifth question is the question that is moving all over social media. So my question is, as apologists, can we make a decision based on that particular incident? The answer is yes, and the answer is also no. The answer is yes, because I believe the 4-minute video in circulation is comprehensive enough for anyone who is informed, and I'm using the word informed. For you to be informed, you must know a bit of theology, a bit of Bible, a bit of church history to be able to sense danger. So you need some skills to be able to comprehend or pick the signals from the 4-minute video. It is no, because if you don't listen to the entire video and the content and possibly get him in print, in scholarship, I don't think you can take someone on easily based on what he says. And as a scholar as he is, for us to be able to take him on, we should get him in print, like he has written, and what I've given you is right bold in his page. So when we are responding based on what he has said. Because listening to him, sometimes you might miss some of the things he wanted to share. This is how he started the program. Many people do not know the Bible. Many people do not know that the Bible is one book and that the entire book carries one message about one person, Christ. Agreed perfectly. This foundation, superb. I subscribe to it, and no Orthodox Christian or apologist will deny that. I've given you 2 posts. Let's look at it. Let's evaluate it. Then we move forward. The book as written in segment in 2 pages. The book as written is segmented in 2. The Old Testament, Jesus concealed. The New Testament, Jesus revealed. If this were to be a proper writing, ideally, he should have acknowledged who made this statement, because in scholarship, you cannot use someone's idea and present it as yours. The Old Testament is the New Testament concealed. The New Testament is the Old Testament revealed. It's a statement by Augustine of Hippo, the 4th century theologian and an African who made that discovery and made that statement. Let's assume, because this is not a book, he did not acknowledge, so that's no problem. So I still agree to the premises he is building. The Old Testament is a darkness or a mystery. That is that which requires interpretation, while the New Testament is a revelation or the explanation of the Old Testament. Here, if you want to subject it to serious scrutiny, it will be found a bit lacking. If you describe the entire Old Testament as a mystery or as darkness, you are doing overgeneralization. Because if you take the Old Testament very well as a scholar or as a Bible study, you should understand the literal genre of the entire Old Testament. There are historical books, there are wisdom books, there are prophetic books. Even in the prophetic literature, there are apocalyptic literature in there. So for you to be able to understand the Old Testament, exegete it very well, and communicate it very well, you cannot make this simplistic generalization. So here, based on the two premises above, anybody who wants to follow him will consider him as a deep person worth following. But where we have read, there seems to be an issue anyone who is informed should be a bit concerned about. Two, the New Testament is a revelation or the explanation of the Old Testament is also very true, but also limited in a way. It is not the entire New Testament word for word, chapter by chapter, book by book that exegete or explain the entire Old Testament. That is also not accurate. If you have read about William J.W. Kaiser, an authority of both semantic languages and New Testament studies, and then Dara Buck, the one doctor, PhD holder, also an authority in the New Testament, they have authored a book and then Dr. Michael Brown, my favorite. If you read these three people and their account on how the New Testament authors use the Old Testament, this is not the conclusion they came to. This is what they said. They said a close examination of the New Testament will reveal that anytime they are using or citing the Old Testament, there are three ways of using the Old Testament. Either they will make a direct quotation or citation to a specific chapter. So sometimes they will tell you it is written. It means they are quoting directly. Or they are paraphrasing. They are paraphrasing. They will tell you that as the scriptures have said. So here, they are not quoting exact portions of the Old Testament. They are paraphrasing and using it hermeneutically. And this will do you a lot good anytime you are doing at the Old Testament, the New Testament dichotomy and how to resolve it. Because people like the anti-Semitic rabbis have written a lot about how the New Testament was manufactured just to create an identity for Jesus to fit the Jewish Messiah. And if you know these people are quoted and the work they have done, you will understand the relationship between the New Testament and the Old Testament and how the Old Testament, the New Testament either uses the Old Testament. I don't have enough time to go into all the four and do a serious work on that. So the statement that the Old Testament is a mystery, darkness, and as a result, the New Testament is an explanation or revelation has a bit of truth in it, but not the whole truth. Now, so the Bible is a Christocentric material that carries in a Christocentric message that is centered on the person of Jesus Christ. That is very good statement, but you identify only one theme of the entire Bible. As a Christian, I subscribe to this, but when it comes to public declaration, you need to be very careful making these overgeneralized statements. Yes, the scripture speaks about Christ. The central theme is about Christ. The general focus doctrinally is Christology. But that does not mean there are other historical or issues that need to be explained historically. So that is not, in my perspective, a good picture to paint as a startup to answer your question. Therefore, look at what he said. It is an intelligent piece of literature that requires a lot of study, and that is the challenge to all of us. We need to study. We need to study because in the beginning was the word, not Facebook. So it is time, Christians, we abandon some of the things that catch our attention so much and dedicate ourselves to books. So I agree with him perfectly. to study teachings, explanation, and the revelation of the Holy Spirit. And as a Pentecostal apologist by orientation, I subscribe to the work of the Holy Spirit, including helping me to understand the scriptures. Now let's continue on. Christ is the message of the Old Testament and not Moses, Elijah, or any other prophet. So now he's building a foundation and he's gotten here. Yes, Christ is not, Moses and Elijah were not the central message, but their characters you cannot deal without them. God used them in their dispensation uniquely to prepare the way for Christ. So we cannot diminish them. So here, what I'm saying is that a premise is being built to lead to what we call corrective revelation. I made an appeal to progressive revelation. Progressive revelation means that God is speaking to his people. And depending on the time, the situation, and the context, that which God, out of his own infinite wisdom, considered to be appropriate is what he reveals. And the real revelation and the climax of his revelation was seen in the person of Christ. The fact that it has been seen in the person of Christ does not mean that in the context of previous revelations, they were in error or they were problematic. These are difficult issues we need to critically sit down and analyze very well. This premise continues. But having read through all the pages and everything, we'll continue next week. But there are two issues I have identified as far as the whole issue is concerned. One, he seems to subscribe to the 2nd century teaching, which the church described and discarded it from the church by Marcion, who had a problem with the God of the Old Testament, who said, the God we see in the person of Jesus is loving, is good, is always helping people. Compared to the God of the Old Testament, there seems to be a problem. Don't forget, historically, the Gnostics had raised issue as far as their nature of God is concerned, the demerge. They were of the view that matter is evil and spirit is good. That is the premise the Gnostics were coming from. So anything material is evil, and anything physical is good, is bad. That is material or physical, it is evil, and anything spiritual is good. Therefore, the God who was able to create this material universe, there's a bit of evilness or bad in him. In their perspective, the supreme being who cannot be seen is known as the Aeon. And that Aeon is so supreme and above that it is beyond human comprehension and reach. But in that God, I'm teaching you the Gnostic idea of the origin of God. They will tell you to the point that there is a feminine or the masculine and feminine aspect of that Aeon, all in the realms, spiritual world, not physical. And each interaction between the masculine and the feminine aspect of the Aeons in their Gnostic theology of who God is produces another element, which is also spirit in the world, in the spirit world. A time came, there was a violation of a principle in the spiritual world where there was somebody known as Sophia. And if you have studied Gnosticism, you understand what Sophia means. Sophia had interaction with the merge as a violation of that spiritual principle, and the God or the product was Yahweh. And the Yahweh is the one who created heaven and earth. So already there has been a violation of principle. Because of the violation, that person who is the product of that interaction cannot possess entirely spiritual attribute. Therefore, there's a bit of spirituality in him and then material. That is why he was able to create the physical universe we are in. So the Gnostic cosmology, in brief, is what I've just shared with you. On the basis of that, that is why the God of the Old Testament is so responsible for the atrocities, the death, and the dangers we see. So when he got to this position as a presbyter in the church, he discarded the entire Old Testament, discarded portions of the New Testament, then he created his own canon. And when he created the canon of the Bible in his own mind to support his newfound theology, that is what caused awareness in the church for the church to compile the New Testament. I find that there seems to be in the mind of the man of God, having listened to him for some time now, close to 72 hours, and having read the script I have before me, there seems to be the confusion that was in the mind of Marcion in his theology now. Not only that, questions, so we'll pick on this next week, dive deep onto this very well because of time. Then another problem I had with him, question 9. Question 9, they asked him, he should define Trinity in brief. Let's look at the answer he gave, which also led us to another heresy in the 4th and the 5th century. Please clarify the concept of the Trinity, unquote. Answer, Trinity is a concept of redemption. God became a man in the person of Christ and died for man, so man can be saved. After the resurrection, Jesus returned as spirit to make the abode in the heart of the saved man. This is technically known as modernism or monarchianism. What this heresy also teaches in the Old Testament and the church history is that now Jesus is the same as the Father revealed in the Old Testament. He is the same person that came and died physically. He is the same person that resurrected and came back to live in our heart. And that raises several problems. After Nicene tradition, the challenges about Christ, responding to Arianism, responding to Docetism, these were also other challenges that came. And this is what led to the Council of Chalcedon, where they responded to this and responded to the dual nature of Christ. So I see that he has a Trinitarian challenge picked from the monarchist heresy and modalism, and then he also has an issue with Marcion, Marcionian heresy. One borders on the authority, consistency, inherency of the scriptures. The second one borders on who Christ is, or a proper theological reflection of the Godhead. So this is my brief reflection or recognition of his position now. But next week, I promise you we wouldn't go deep into the Exodus again. We will take time to go through all the 10 questions. Then I will provide a response to all the questions where it borders on 1, anthropological issues, where it borders on biblical authority issues, where we need to go to original language. We will do that. I think I've taken a lot of your time today. I apologize for that, but thank you for joining. It is my prayer that the good Lord will water what he shared with us and still help us to open our eyes to know where the lines are. At this point, by 9:40, we should close. It's now 9:35 here. I know Ghana, it will be 8:35. So please, coordinator, I hand over to you. I will take some few comments and reactions. As I've done an intro to this, we will dive deep into this when we meet next week.
Thank you, Elder.
I've identified 2 problems, monarchism or modalism and Marcion challenges or difficulties. And on this does not make him a false prophet. That is what